Alles verder breed?
Zou jij dat doen?
Lang duurt het. Is het al openstaan?
Deur open, deur dicht.
Hier begin ik, Jack. Hier.
Ja, gaat wel zo.
Hier. Deze microfoon die laatste is in het donker. Dan sta ik heel erg in het licht.
Nee, die zie je niet goed uit.
Nee, dat wel.
Kun je niet verder naar achteren?
Ja, we rennen 1 minuut hier en dan ga ik zitten. Het is zo gek om er bovenop te zitten.
Ja, dat is waar. Nou, je mag best een licht pakken hoor.
Als je dan langs het podium nog 1 stap naar achter zet.
Ja, nog een klein stukje. Oh, ja, nu zijn we mooi, nu zijn we wel mooi.
Ja, hier.
Ja.
Dan ga ik hier beginnen zo.
Ja.
Voor ons beeld.
Microfoon 5, ja?
Welke is dat? 5.
De laatste.
Dat is gewoon...
Ja.
Kijk. Dat je in ieder geval 1 bezoeker.
Ja, zo.
Martijn is gereisd. Oké.
Oh, ja. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Welcome at the Memorial Center Kalm-Westerbork. Welcome everybody here in the room, of course. Welcome everybody watching on the stream now or later. My name is Bas Kortelt. I'm a researcher here at the Memorial Center, and today I will be the moderator. I think this is the right word for this special event we are having today. What are we going to do? In the next 1.5 hours, we're going to talk about art as a way of depicting, telling the story of places like Kalm-Westerbork. We have 2 round tables with experts from different backgrounds. We have music from the Prins Claus Conservatorium, the Prins Claus Conservatoire. But we start with the main event, the reason we are here, I would say, the opening of the guest curatorship of Michael Branthwaite. His guest curatorship is one of the 8 guest curatorships of a project of ours called a team year, you could say, called De Herinnering aan Kalm-Westerbork, the memory of Kalm-Westerbork, in which we investigated the different kind of meanings that were given and still are given to a place like Kalm-Westerbork. Michael, can I invite you to come on stage, and we start with an interview about who you are and what you are doing here, etc. Thank you. Yeah. So, Michael. Yes, it works. Hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah.
Michael, to start off, how does somebody growing up in the northern part of England, a place with no physical bonds, you could say, with the Holocaust, end up so many years later here in Kalm-Westerbork? Where did your interest, your maybe even your fascination come from?
Hi, yeah. It started in a history lesson, and I often tell this story. So my history teacher was also the head teacher in this little mine in a village in the northeast of England, and we walked into the lesson one day, and the classroom was set out in 2 halves, and we were directed to take our seats. He then proceeded to praise one side of the class. You're really good, you represent the school really well, you're progressing really well, you're great students, and I seem to remember him saying, and I can be really proud of you. And then he then went on to the other half of the class and started to say that there were a bit of a disappointment. They were letting the school down. What was he going to do with them? This went on for about it feels like about 15 minutes. It was probably 3 or 4 minutes in reality. And then without saying anything, he then introduced us to Nazi propaganda from the 30s and posters depicting racial stereotypes, so on and so forth, and then proceeded to, if you like, disassemble everything he had done. And at that point, I didn't immediately think, I want to be an artist and I'll be making these exhibitions, but there was just something in my mind where, and I do have to say, I was on the side of the classroom that was being praised. So I just suddenly kind of went, hold on. Yeah, things can really happen. This isn't just something from movies. In real life, people can say things, they can use the media to make people maybe think things that previously would be really disgusting and abhorrent and unbelievable. So that was the first thing. The second thing, which might sound a little bit superficial, is Sky Television came along. We had satellite television, and there was a series called The World at War. I think that was the one narrated by Laurence Olivier. And there was survivor testimonies in that series. And I particularly remember that series because of the testimonies, not just because of the history aspect of it. And then I can remember thinking, oh, this is a bit like that history lesson. I then went to university, I started making art, and the art that I was making was very much to do with consumerism. It was you bought objects to look a certain way, to feel a certain way, to identify with a certain group. And because of that, I got a little bit interested in archaeology and how they were kind of reversing that process when they were digging objects up. And went to have a meeting with the Centre of Archaeology, now the Centre of Archaeology and Genocide Studies at Staffordshire University. And about halfway through the meeting, they suddenly said, well, hold on, we're doing an exhibition at Treblinka. We found all these objects and we don't know what to do with them. They're challenging the narrative, they're raising questions, and it could hide itself away in a journal or something like that somewhere, but we actually want to get this message out. That's coming up to 10 years ago, and that's where it all started. And then we met on various projects, and yeah.
And was that visit to Treblinka your first visit to a former concentration camp, or was that already earlier a visit to a?
Yeah, I'd been to Auschwitz, leading a university visit, and again it had a huge impact. I was thinking ideas, but at that point there was just nothing. There was no traction. There was nothing tangible that was making me think I could make art about this in response to this or tackle this through art. It was really when Professor Caroline Sturdy-Coles from the Centre of Archaeology presented me with these images of objects that found at Treblinka, where suddenly I thought, okay, I could see that in a case, I could see what text might go with it, and what new objects and how that could lead to other artworks in the broadest sense.
And you already said it. Then we met in some projects by Professor Rob van der Laarzen from the UvA, the University of Amsterdam. And then at one point, we, as a memorial center, asked you to be a guest curator like 2 years ago. What was your initial thought, and how did the process went from then till now, till today?
The initial response was, wow, this is really exciting, and what a great opportunity. I suppose the first thing I started thinking about was all the conversations I'd had about Westerbork and what was sort of, the things that kept reoccurring and kept coming up. And one of those things was the sort of longevity of it as a physical site, with it then being used by other groups of people after the transit camp. So there was that aspect of it. And then I think through various conversations we've had over the last 2 years and visiting the area, and it's little things like bringing my family once while I was kind of doing some things here, and then thinking, okay, what are they going to do during the day? And realizing that the alternative to Westerbork is maybe a zoo or a fun park or something like that, and then thinking, okay, so this has immense kind of historical relevance, but in terms of if you're a fresh visitor, say, maybe you go to Westerbork one day, maybe you go to the outdoor museum the next day, and then I was thinking, okay, well, how does that fit? Because it's in the mind of somebody who's interested, you come to Westerbork and then you maybe go to the Anne Frank Museum, and then you maybe go around other camps. So yeah, and this is kind of where the exhibition came from. So thinking about how it's framed and how it fits into its local landscape, and at the same time not ignoring the sort of gravity of the history as well.
And if you look behind us, we see some pictures of the works that I took yesterday. So the works were all almost finished. So the last details we're going to see, of course, in an hour or so. If you now zoom in on the 4 works, what example was your idea behind the cattle car 3 minutes?
Okay, cattle car 3 minutes. It was when I was watching the Westerbork film and seeing the cattle car show. That was one thing, because I think that's something that I've seen in lots of different camps across Europe. There's something about that door closing. It's ominous, but it also signals something, because clearly that transport is going to leave, and so I was interested in that. And then I know from a conversation with Bass, where we were talking about the person who shut the cattle car door, and how that had kind of, that's all they were remembered for, just that little moment. So what I wanted to do with that work was just really slow it down to put it in a domestic environment and kind of just sort of contemplate it a bit more. And while I was doing that, and I'll kind of point this out, there was just so many interesting little things from each frame, just like hand gestures. There's a lady in the background looking out, and it takes it away, in my view anyway, from the door shutting to what, this relationship between those people in that moment. And I think it just gives a very different, maybe more human kind of grasp of that situation, rather than another door shutting, which is maybe something that.
And I think it also, there's a kind of popular trend in more art museums nowadays in the Netherlands, and that is that you focus more on a painting, because a lot of people, especially in museums like ours, take a look at a photo for maybe 3 to 5 seconds and then jump on. And if you take a longer look at a painting or a photograph, you discover way more, and you can see more insights, and you can also a little bit portray your own perspective on that. So I think that's very interesting. Another thing you worked on is a piece called 3D Barrack. Could you say something about that?
Yeah, so 3D Barrack used photogrammetry, which is a really easy process for getting a 3D image. Photogrammetry. You take maybe 350 images, you install a bit of software on your phone or your iPad or whatever, and it sort of disappears, and 2 minutes later it comes back and you have a 3D model. And I was doing that when I visited, and Guido was showing me the archives. And I knew I wanted to do something with one of the 3D prints. I didn't know which one or what I would do. But when I was going back through and looking at them, there was sort of, 2 or 3 things happened when I kept coming back to that print. One is the barrack, and again, back to a conversation about people arriving, and the 2 main things is, where's the barrack that Anne Frank was in, and where's the gas chambers? And obviously that's not kind of the experience you get, or even factually true on the second one. So I was just really interested in the barrack as being such a strong symbol. And I'd also been reading some academic papers on the barrack in the United States Holocaust Museum, and how that was kind of such a huge thing for them to get. So there's 2 things happen, where one, this little barrack, which was actually made by somebody in the camp, has this light on it, so it has this whole, it carries this whole sort of weight. And then through quite a lot of working with the technicians in the Smart Zone at Staffordshire University, we eventually figured out a way to leave bits on it that should be removed. And so these parts underneath are the digital support, so that the print doesn't slump when it's being printed. And I just got really interested in them being there, because that's kind of the scaffolding, that's kind of the thing that holds the barrack up and projects it in the space, but it's also the digital. And then that comes back to these thoughts I was having about the framing and how we can construct the experience in a camp like Westerbork.
Yeah, and some of my colleagues, another piece, they were looking at it, the colleagues from the Museum Cafe, and they're a little bit scared that they get out of a job because you want to serve free coffee in the exhibition. What is the idea behind this?
I suppose, interestingly, it comes back to my first visit to a camp, which was Auschwitz. And we got back on the bus, and one of the students was was really hungry and just got on the bus and, he was embarrassed afterwards, but just went, I'm effing starving and I really need a drink. And everybody just kind of turned around and went, we were in there like 20 seconds ago. But then that started making me think about human needs and what should the visitor experience be like? And the cafe here is pretty good. The cafe in Falstad's pretty good. Jasanovic in Croatia doesn't have one, but they'll direct you to this really great little ice cream parlor just down the road. So it was just kind of those two things coexisting and those judgments. And again, from a conversation with yourself and looking at the TripAdvisor feedback on Westerbork, the quality of the food is quite important. And so how do all these things sit together, and what are people bringing and leaving? So the point, if you like, to come to a conclusion is, should you be having coffee? Should you be having nice sandwiches? Should the food be really basic? And should you be, what should you be engaging in when you're kind of gazing and consuming what is essentially other people's misery?
And I think it's also a quite actual discussion, in the sense that maybe 1.5 years ago there was a big roar when somebody started selling ice cream 200 meters from the gate of Auschwitz. So in that sense, strangely, one of the most talked about topics is eating in a concentration camps. And I met a survivor who said, you can do anything in a concentration camp, or former concentration camp, holograms, VRs, but people cannot eat over here. So ethical boundaries is a very... it's a topic that we discuss about at a memorial center, but it's also very interesting, I would say, for an artist to play with.
Yeah, and I just want to make it clear that I'm not pro or anti this. I just think this is a conversation to bring up to think about, and then it's kind of that phrase which I think Tim Cole came up, which is the Disneyfication, the theme park, and how much of a theme park do you need to get the average person through the door? And what is the line where you're also a serious museum dealing with a very serious issue? And these seem to be two things that need to happen, but there just seems to be so many pitfalls in conversations and balancing, getting it right, maybe never getting it right, but always being able to change. I don't know.
And I think this is also one of the ideas behind the last work, the name giver, you could say, of the whole concept of the exhibition. Everything will be okay in the morning. Could you say a little bit more about what you try to do with that?
I mean, I think hopefully you'll be grasping the kind of the themes and the interests that have been the driver for the exhibition and why it looks like the way it does. It was that idea with the theme park, and I was sort of thinking about what was the best way to do that, and neon lights just seems to be the most ubiquitous kind of thing that people recognize as being connected with some kind of entertainment. But I think it also, quite interestingly, represents decline a bit as well, or kind of like a changing as new media comes in. So it is that, but the lights are on a timer, or they're all on timers. So it also connects directly with historical fact. So the lights are on for 1 minute for every year, or near enough. Each of those groups are in the camp, and then they go off for a minute, and then they come back on. So you kind of have this paradox of historical fact but transmitted through this kind of, if you like, seductive kind of lighting system style, lighting style. And then underneath each of the neon signs is a display case, and there's actually an object from the archive. This is something I'm really interested in when I work with history, is bringing those objects into different contexts. So that they are real objects. They are connected with those people, those groups. So that brings this kind of, the seriousness back into the exhibition.
So 4 artworks, 4 ideas behind it. In an hour, it will be open for the public in the next 2 months. What do you hope that a visitor takes home after visiting your guest curatorship?
I hope they. Well, I hope they leave with a question. I hope they learn a little bit, because there are facts in there. That it's not that it's a complete fabrication. So I hope there's a little bit of learning, but that's also present in the rest of the museum, Memorial Centre. I hope that it kind of stirs something in them to reflect more about the day they've had and the experience they've had, and maybe, even though this looks a little bit more like it's taken certain sort of theme park and visitor sort of attraction tropes, that because of that they actually think, well, actually, yeah, I should have a bit more of a serious relationship with the other stuff, and not just think about the coffee. Yeah.
So more questions than answers people will go home with, probably.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's kind of quite often the role of artists as well, to pose that. But
And is that also something you want to do something with? Because we talked the last couple of days also about some research into the public. Is there something after this exhibition?
Yeah. Right now, I don't know, but I think definitely something I'm interested in from a research perspective is what people are thinking and what people know before they walk in, and what they are thinking and what they feel they know when they leave. So something I'm interested in my research is kind of the before and after of the exhibition. That comes with a bit of trepidation with art, I think, because sometimes it can be 2 or 3 months after the exhibition or after seeing a work of art where suddenly you think, oh, I remember that now, and that suddenly makes sense, so that there is a bit of trepidation in it. But yeah, it's definitely something I'm interested in, is that impact and the change to thinking. Yeah.
I think this is a good bridge to start with the first roundtable, the impact of art on society, on visitors. So thank you, Michael. And can I now ask Rafaela Kula to join us on stage? And Rafaela is an artist from Germany who worked with us in the Memory of Kamp Westerbork project. She has done a lot of things on Sobibor. She worked with Jules Gelfis when he was still alive, with Rosetta Katz and others, one of the guest curators here, the first guest curator. So welcome, Rafaela. Secondly, I want to ask Jacob Ganselmeier to come on stage. And Jacob also worked in this project, in a project called Houses of Darkness, that we as a Memorial Center did, you could say, with Bergen-Belsen, with Paradox, a company from the Netherlands in Valstad. And Jacob, together with others, created works in Bergen-Belsen and in Valstad. And last but not least, I want to invite Ronit Eden to come on stage. And Ronit is since 1989. I was 7 years old at the time, working as a curator and exhibition maker. So a lot of experience making exhibitions, amongst others, in the Netherlands and Israel. So welcome also to you, Ronit. And I've asked Rafaela, Jacob, and Ronit to introduce a little bit of themselves by showing us a project they did themselves, or they worked on, that, or they are interested in. To show us a little bit, okay, these are my ideas, this is who I am. Rafaela, could you start with your project? And I will put on a slide with some pictures that you sent me of the 2 works.
Okay.
One of the works you did in Westerbork and the other work you did in another place, but I think you can explain it better yourself.
Okay, I think both works are connected. You see on the right side, A Place of Murder and the Sky is Blue. It's an installation about, Sobibor, how I experienced it when I was the first time there, how I experienced it together with Jules Gelfis or Jetje Mannheim or Rosette Katz, all people who lost their family. They were directly confronted with the murder. And I thought with my installation, A Place of Murder and the Sky is Blue, it's important to give another option to go into history. art can be light, art can be inviting. I work with mirrors, I work with Stacheldraht. You see, it's irritating, it's complicated. There are different emotions in it and different possibilities to concentrate. I work always with material from nature because it starts growing and it dies, and it can be a symbol for time. And one aspect is, I think, luckily, Holocaust stopped in 1945, but a lot of things happened afterwards. And until now, I can see things which are important for Rosette or Jetje. Even Jules did a lot of things as a human being, not as a survivor. His mice, his bird he draw, I like it very much, and I put it into my installation because it shows how human he is. That's one thing, and luckily in spring I was here on the former camp and I made a performance. I work with energy, my body, and with people passing by. So I was in this tree. I think he was there already when the camp was there, and I made a concon around me. I needed 3 days to disappear. And while I was there, a lot of the people who were there came near me and asked, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Yes, I'm disappearing." I think at a place like this, it makes sense to think about what is disappearing. And all of a sudden, I had so many stories about the meaning of Westerbork, what happened here, why they go here, what they think about Holocaust, what they think about the right development now. A lot of things. I'm writing a report and we will go on with it, but that was really, in a way, overwhelming. It costed a lot of concentration, but it was great. And I liked it because I could participate the stories from Jules or Jetje or Rosette or others, and I got a lot of stories from the person. So it was great to be here.
Yeah, you could say 1,000 persons, 1,000 different kind of meanings people give to Westerbork. And the first project was also very interesting to me. And also talked to Rosette Katz, who knew Jules Gelfis quite good, and she told me a story about that. Jules and Rosette were on vacation, and Jules was lying on the beach reading a book, and then immediately in my mind I didn't see him only as a survivor anymore. I saw him as a human being. So that was very interesting to also take in this, you could say. Jacob, could you say something about some of the works you did? I have some pictures from the works you made in our Houses of Darkness project, but again, you can explain it much better than I can do.
Yes. In my work, my artistic practice, I am working on how right-wing symbolism can be dismantled. Like how much is a lot of these symbols, which are basically from the time between 1939 and 1945, very practiced and all around us in Germany, how can they contextualize, dismantled, and how are they reoccurring today in which medias and which platforms? And that sense, my first work, my first serious work to that was with former neo-Nazis who get rid of their former tattoos, like they get when they're very young into the scene, and then get the tattoos to show everybody, hey, that's my full belief. And when they actually exit the scene, when they get on the process out, and luckily there are organizations like Exit Germany who are helping them, but then they actually get rid of these tattoos through basically covering and laser processes. On the other hand, we have many of these symbols from the time of the Third Reich quite non-contextualized in the German city landscapes, where completely the signs of power are basically left alone and always questioning them. And the framework of Houses of Darkness, I was very much interested in how distanced are we to that time? Like, how does actually the perpetrator's perspective also works? Because on the one hand, it is different when we look from the side of the perpetrator and their representations. And for that, for instance, I looked a lot through 4chan and 8chan channels. How do we actually communicate? What do these symbols actually mean? Because on the one hand, we have very right radical ideology. The symbol is, at the end of the day, the vocabulary. Right now, many people actually don't know the vocabulary to understand the ideology, which brings a distance. But I could talk about it for hours, so I might.
Yeah, and probably I think also interesting to mention. Of course, you can explain it better than I can. But you grew up in the city of Dachau.
Yeah, I mean that's really sometimes a bit of a Dutch thing, because that makes it all. Now it makes sense that this guy is fully into that history. But in fact, actually, what really motivated me was not that I grew up in Dachau, quite close to the former concentration camp. It were more, of course, it always makes something with you, like there's no doubt about it. But the NSU, the National Socialist Underground, the rising of the AfD, like that was more the position where a generation like mine, whose grandfathers were in whatever way part of the system, was more of a way, hey, how do we position ourselves to that actually? Like, how much is that actually reoccurring today? What kind of statements can we do from our side? Like, how can we maybe not to feel guilty in any way, but to feel implicated, as Michael Rothberg would say. Like this is more maybe a feeling of, not to sound cheesy, but a feeling of responsibility in whatever way.
Especially in the world, I think, that we are living in now today, with 800% anti-Semitism rising in the Netherlands, I heard today on the news. So the work is still needed, you could say. Ronit, you brought something with you which isn't your own project, but another project you worked on. So I give you the clicker.
Oh, you can have the clicker, okay. And I do.
Then I'm your assistant. Say when you want to move.
Please, thank you. Yeah. Well, I didn't work with Yael Atzmoni, but I know her work long time. And I choose to show a part of this project, which called a project of mapping the Sobibor death camp, because I find it a very subtle, very delicate work, but on the same time, very, very strong. So Yael Atzmoni is an Israeli artist. She lives and works in Israel. Next one. Her father, Dov Feinberg, was one of the only survivors of a Sobibor camp. And all her life, she heard stories about the camp itself. He was describing it. He was telling her, when you turn on the left, that's what you see. When you turn to the right, that's what you see. And she grew up with these stories. And just to sum it very short, we know today that, we know long time, that there are no remains and no ruins from the camp itself. And Dov Feinberg was one of the people who succeeded to run away in 1943 in the revolt. Actually 600 tried to run away, about 100 were shot, about 200 were hiding in the forest, and he survived it. And he wrote 5 books about it, etc. So she heard about the maps, and she knew that there are several, like about 30 different maps, which slightly different, made by SS officers, by Russian soldiers, etc. And what she did, she was invited to a center here in the Netherlands, which is a ceramic laboratorium, blah, 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 something. And she was invited in 2012. And she felt that she's ready to deal with this very loaded topic. And she felt she's ready in a way that first, well, it's after her father's death, that's one thing. And the second thing is, in this laboratorium, you can develop new technique or new materials. And she felt this is her chance to develop something new. So she casted these maps, which are following the 30 maps that she found in different archives. Now move, yeah, and another one. So as you can see, she casted about 50 maps. And as you could see before, there are different colors. And the colors are actually coming from, again, from the stories of her father, because he said that the ground changed the colors because of some dust that came from the chambers and covered the soil. Or sometimes the polluted water dyed the ground. So that's how she chose the colors. But I think the most, or maybe the hardest map that she casted, if you can, yeah, this map her father made in 1945, and he thought he lost it, and it was found in an archive in Warsaw. And as you can see, he wrote in Yiddish remarks and explaining what you can see and what you can find. And to the next one, please. And she casted it. And it was, she said it was very difficult because this one she made with a very specific kind of porcelain, very fragile, and a new technique that she developed. And it was very special for her to cast this map. The next project she did a year after, if you can, she found aerial photographs that were taken in 1946. And this blueprinted, she printed on both sides of the porcelain. Next one. And then she rolled them. And she made 11 maps of them. And I would like to read what she said about them. I have to leave to the viewer to imagine what was drawn in these maps. This is my way to respect those who were murdered, and at the same time to respect the viewers who approach to this artwork with their own background and their own knowledge. And whatever they understand, it is respectable. And I found it, as I said, very, very strong and very subtle in a statement of telling the story of the place.
Yeah, true. And
yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And it also, I think that's the interesting part. We didn't know on forehand if you had any relationships in your artwork, but I think this is also one of the things you did in Treblinka, and Caroline did in Treblinka, mapping the place. And I'm now working here for 20 years. I've met Jules Gelfis a lot of times in that 20 years. He was always busy with mapping, also Sobibor, and really figuring it out and making maps with my colleagues. So, and for him, this was also his work on Sobibor, a way to get a grip on his past, to get a grip on his memory. So I think that's interesting that it isn't only to the Netherlands, it's also in England, it's also in Germany, it's everywhere that survivors have to really work on it, to get a grip on their memories, to have it, to let it have a life on their own, you could say. Now going to the discussion, and I'm going to start by doing it in a typical Dutch way. And in the Netherlands, we have a saying that it's said, throw the bat in the hen house. And I'm going to start with that. So Adorno, I think everybody will know Adorno, he wrote in the 1950s that no poetry was possible after Auschwitz. So Rafaela, what are we doing here? Can we make art about the Holocaust, or is there a bit too far?
I think we should try to find ways to deal with it now and in future times. It's getting harder every minute as we see in which time we live. Now, you talked about NSU, that was complicated. We know the right, they win everywhere, it's complicated. But I think we have to go on with it because all these survivors. They gave us their memories, and I personally feel really obliged to do something with the memory of Jewel. It's clear I have to do it, but I experience as well, it makes really sense to do it in a different way. You can read the book, you can go into an archive. It's always, in a way, a burden for me. I think it's very hard work, and I need it in a way that I can think about human beings, about the persons to whom it happened, and what happens after the war and everything, ne? How Rosette lives, how she developed, what Jules did. And I think that's a thing we can go on. I tried it in the tree, and I really like to be in the tree. It was great.
And for you, Jacob, because I know that nowadays you are working on a project with a completely different kind of topic. On the one hand, is there a difference in dealing with the Holocaust than in other topics, or?
Yeah, that's a no-brainer question, right? Because of course, like it's not a like each of these topics, not that you jump from one to the next, but have their own sensitivities that you require to also to do to go with a kind of an ethical compass and to tackle one. But I mean, this quote, first and all, like art per se is not always like political. Like that's also very important to acknowledge. Like, and it also doesn't need to be. Like it is. It's not an. It's not inherently that art is political or position itself towards it. It's still up to the artist, to him or her, to basically decide that. Nonetheless, like on the other hand, like history is also not linear. Like things are coming back, and they are not going in a circle either. They're going mostly in spirals, and you basically touch on the point where the spiral gets out of the circle and gets up. In that sense, I would say, I mean, I called one series of 4 fights that poetry is out of place because some of the things are so distant and so forgotten, and so also, like that you basically my poetry might not be the right art form at that point. And in that sense, I would say like it's still just necessary.
So poetry maybe not always be the right form to tell. And if you look here now in the Memorial Center, of course, we have historical exhibitions, we have films. There you can buy a book. So Ronit, what makes art different from these other forms of telling the story?
Well, I think that first, I think art connected to Holocaust changed during the years. If the beginning it was more being the witnesses to tell the story, what happened, to document, to capture the evil things that happen, and slowly it's changed to, I would say, a different phase of warning phase, I would call it. Yeah, it's more about being alert or being aware to what is happening. So I would say that it changed. But I see the difference between art and let's say artistic work and what the role of, let's say, museums or monuments or these memorial days, which are very important. They are for everyone. They want to include everyone. They try to be as wide as possible, that people will feel easily accessible to the meaning. While art, it doesn't. Oh, okay. Thank you. While art, not necessarily is going there. The other thing is that I think art having the role of zoom in and bringing stories and narratives that they are not always included. Yeah, I take it to the side story. Like if you look at the Amsterdam Historical Museum, the stories that are telling there, till today for 100 years is the white man, what he did, what he approached, what he did, and the paintings and everything. And luckily, these days, the artists who are showing works, and I'm working with one of them, is to tell a different story, a different voice having a place now. So it's different. And somehow you combine it with information and what we know and with research, which is now coming together with the role of museums.
And maybe also what Michael said he hoped for this exhibition would do, that sometimes historic exhibitions give answers and art raises questions, and sometimes a question maybe is better, Michael, if I look at you, than an answer.
Yeah, can I go back to the Adorno?
Of course.
Yeah. Yeah, because I've always understood that quote as being artists trying to capture the horror or represent the horror. And yeah, maybe in that there's not much place because it stands for itself. But as we progress through history, which I think everybody's touched on in one way or another, other things present themselves. We live in different contexts. We have different reference points. And within that, I certainly do think there's a role for art to have to create these conversations, to reconnect with memories and, repackage, re-represent and so on and so forth. And can I ask you what your original question was before I went back to Adorno?
It was about answers and questions, but maybe because you also mentioned Tim Cole, and Tim Cole is a professor in England, and he wrote a quite famous book about the Disneyfication, you could say, of the Holocaust. And a couple of weeks ago at the end conference of the Houses of Darkness project, he was in Oslo, and he said 1993 is a key year in the story of the Holocaust. And one of the things it is the key year for because Schindler's List came out. I don't think I have to explain Schindler's List. Everybody knows Schindler's List. And of course, before Schindler's List, you had a television series Holocaust, which was very famous in Germany, I believe, in the 70s, but also in the Netherlands. And some historians at the time, in the 90s, but also in the 70s, and some artists said, this is not the way to tell the story. And even Claude Lanzmann made his documentary show as an answer, you could say, to Schindler's List. Is there a rule book of engagement in making art? You could even argue, is Schindler's List art? But is there a rule book of engagement? Should you not show some things, or how do you look at it, Michael?
Yeah. Oh,
difficult question. Sorry.
Yeah. I don't think there's a rule book. I think that's one thing. But I think there are rigorous ethical processes to go through, and that they're kind of the safeguard that you're not exploiting, or if you're referencing exploitation, it's contextualized and presented in such a way that becomes quite apparent, or that's part of the challenge. So no, I don't think there's a rule book because there's just so many different views and opinions and connections. But I think there is good practice.
And if we can dive on that, Jacob, should art always have a message for the here and now, or could it only be a monument that remembers? Is that also okay?
I mean, monuments are not made for eternity normally, or they were never in that sense. But I think one interesting take on Schindler's List was, of course, Godard, and how much do you actually, like you said, exploit actually? Can you actually feel it? Can you really re-feel the horror that people from Auschwitz actually have lived through? Is that actually really possible? And do you really think that a movie like that does that? And that is a very legit question when we go nowadays to the bridge to the Disneyfication. Starts with, if I go through a former concentration camp with an iPad in my hand, which shows me where the former watchtowers are. Which is again like a shortcut of not actually believing in the ability to feel something when you are in Bergen-Belsen or in Falster, but you actually first need the screen to actually really reimagine if that's really to really re-feel the feeling of the people who were there. And in which position are you actually? Like there were many of these questions, but why this movie Schindler's List was in that many discourses, and there's such a material for discussions. But I think that is that idea brings distance at the end of the day. Or I believe in that.
True, but playing the advocate of the devil, that people who did not see Schindler's List probably or maybe would have never heard about the Holocaust. So maybe the Schindler's List serves a purpose in the sense that
That's your job.
that's my job. Yeah, but I think true. But movies get. It's easier to have a very good movie to show to everybody than people to come to a memorial center. So I think they asked this question to the director of Auschwitz in a documentary a couple of years ago, and they asked him, what do you do with everybody? What do you think of everybody that comes here and makes photos? And there's a beautiful photographer who made beautiful series of people photographing at Auschwitz. And this director said, yeah, but if films like Schindler's List didn't exist or photographs didn't exist, maybe those people wouldn't come here. Yeah. So I think for me, because you asked the question to me, it's great that the Schindler's List and then come here. Then not seeing Schindler's List, not coming here.
But what happens when you first have seen Schindler's List and then come here, and that's your only point
that's
focus
the problem.
Point. Yeah. You look for the gas chambers, you look for the death camp, you have a fixed image which you come with, and that makes it actually like Timothy Snyder was the one who said like the Holocaust was bigger than Auschwitz, and there's a truth in it, because we're simplifying with movies like Schindler's List and these images the Holocaust, which is not a good idea in general.
But I just remember I went to school, and my family, Holocaust was not a discussion. I come from a family with a lot of violence and a lot of hidden things, and then in school other pupils discussed about Holocaust, what happened. And I didn't know anything about it, but I was immediately interested. And what happened? I went to the open library and took books and read about it. And for me, it was very important that this happened on television. In school, we didn't talk about it. We later went to Auschwitz, but that wasn't nice. It was very complicated. But this propaganda film, or how can I tell it, was good that it was on television for me.
Maybe to end these, I don't know if anybody remembers. Was it maybe a year? Well, it could be 2 years ago now. This TikTok fad where young people were dressing up as Holocaust victims and putting themselves on TikTok. And I think there's a lot to talk about there in terms of I'm guessing they've Googled the Holocaust. I'm guessing they've looked at what people looked like, and might be slightly controversial, but is that a way to start a conversation with those young people? Because actually they were vilified for what they'd done, and I don't feel that necessarily educated them or directed them to do anything different. It was just you should or you shouldn't do that, and so maybe there are ways in that allow people to, for instance, get to Westerbork to have the next conversation.
And I would always also say that it also depends on who makes the art. I think that you will all know, maybe you also in the public, the art colleague Dancing Auschwitz, which is a quite famous YouTube film of a group of people performing I Will Survive. It's now an exhibition here, the main exhibition of the Memory of Camp Westerbork, performing I Will Survive in places like Auschwitz. The first time people look at it, they are shocked that people really do that. And then they learn the story that one of the singers is an Auschwitz survivor themselves, and have talked to a lot of people about this. And then immediately people change, saying, oh, yeah, I really don't know what I think about it right now. So
that's why, if I may say, that's why you ask about Disneyfication. That's why I think we have to be very careful not to say that there are some rules or boundaries, because comics books, it works. I mean, you could say all kind of things, good, bad, but it works. I saw an exhibition that was made with artificial intelligence, creating the figures how they look like in the Holocaust. It was so bad. I mean, they had red cheeks. No one had red cheeks at that time. So you can use a very high quality or high developed technique, and not to have the soul and the spirit which human being can bring in a rap song or whatever. Yeah. So I think rules can be really stay open, and the quality is of course important, and not to harm, etc., but be careful with rules.
Yeah,
in
I
that
think
sense.
that what two of the most famous artworks I know of about the Holocaust were also from the 1990s. We see them behind us. Quite famous work, the Prada death camps and the Lego death camps, which were on exhibition in New York in
Yeah,
1999.
but the story, you know the story.
Yeah, I know the story.
Yeah,
So,
it was an amazing exhibition, and it was by Danish artists, as far as I remember. The interesting thing that he made only one set of the camp, and then people wanted to show Lego. But the funny thing it was that the answer of the director that he didn't know about the camp. He didn't know, but he allowed to use these blocks to create the camp for the artist.
and
only for the
it
artist.
really raises questions. And my question again is, it shocked a lot of people, but I think we conclude there are no rules. So it's more of the context that you put something in. It's more of the reason behind it. If you do something, that's more important, I would say, than the actual thing that you make.
No, it's
Yeah.
not what, it's how.
It's not what, it's how you.
I think so, quite often, yeah.
And evil can be in very innocent objects.
Yeah, but I think as an artist, I try to be sensitive. I try to be aware of what happens. But I experienced while sitting in the tree and making my concon, I shocked someone really, because she came near and then she experienced in the moment, I'm German, and how can I dare to be on this former camp in a tree and do something with Holocaust? And she really accused me. We were able to get into a discussion, and that was very special for me. I didn't mean to shock anyone, but I shocked her. Can happen. But you have to be sensitive and you have to try to deal with it. And that's important, I think. That's always important, to be aware what's happening, how do people react, and to get into communication, to see what's going on.
Last question for everybody here. Imagine in 25 years you walk into the Memorial Center. How does it look like? And is it even here? What is Westerbork shown? Is it the Disneyfication? Is it going to be a fun park or else, Rafaela?
Oh, I think it's really heavy, because in the moment I think so many things change to strange directions. I hope that there will be still education centers. I hope that there is still memory. For me, I can say I will try to go on like I do. I will tell the story. I will try to make art in this context. I do other art as well, always serious and sensitive. And it has to go, but it's not only my influence.
Jacob?
Very difficult question, but it depends a bit how memory culture is developing, I would say, because on the one hand, as much as we commemorate at a place like this, online radicalization is spreading way faster than we all can grasp here right now. So it depends very much how much we actually, but not only like memorial centers are including or putting an even more focus on the pedagogical work, also like not only like to make it very bluntly old people talking about young people how they should learn, because they do have they have their own language, they have their own communication methods. They do learn that. So if you want that places like that exist in 25 years, then learn their language. And then I think it is very important that places like this still exist. And I mean, I agree with you, like it can also be opening up to be warned about what is happening today, like not only being on the side of remembering the past, also being a watchful observer or a critical observer of what is happening right now. And that is what Houses of Darkness did partly. Synergy effects, inviting different people. That's why we're here, I guess.
Yeah. And education, of course, we're going to jump on into the second roundtable with 2 teachers. Ronit, your thoughts about that?
I thought a lot about it. I feel, I don't know about in 25 years. In a way, personally, I feel it's useful to even think about it. For me, the role of Westerbork and art is here and now, urgently. 32 days ago, there was a terrible terror attack in Israel, while 1,300 children, elderly people, men and women were slaughtered in few hours. And about 241 others were kidnapped. And my world, the art world, was in silence. This terrible event opened again a circle of bloodshed, which is we experience today, and the art world was in silence, almost totally in silence. And we know what comes after the silence. For me, my world collapsed in that sense. And I think the role of places like Westerbork is to deal and to talk about today with art and with education, because this is the future, but so much the present. So it is.
Then let me rephrase the question for Michael. How should Westerbork look like in 25 days? 25 days now. You are the director of the Memorial Center.
Yeah.
He isn't here. You are the director.
The exhibitions will be full. There'll be queues outside, and obviously that's the ideal. 25 days. That's really tricky.
Or 25 years.
Yeah. I mean, I'll go to a slightly optimistic utopian view, I guess, which is that I think centres like this have a kind of like a humanitarian role, and I could see a movement towards that. And then, I'll not talk about it because I think everybody's touched on it, but contemporary relevance is, I think, absolutely crucial. And it makes me think of a project that I'm just starting, which isn't with a group called Not Again, it's with a group called Yet Again. And that seems to be, yet again and yet again. And it's
Still here.
Yeah. And if so I think centres have a role to not just historical education, but a kind of a human awareness and an alertness to things that everybody's spoken about. The radicalisation isn't just on the street; it's up to government levels in some cases now.
A moral obligation, you could say.
Yeah,
to still act. And
I think so. Yeah, that's certainly what kind of I keep saying it's my last project. I've said that for about 4 years, but there's always something makes me come back, and it is that trying to leave the world in a slightly better place than what you found it.
I think this is a good, hopeful end maybe to this discussion. So thank you everybody for your wise words. Before we go to the second roundtable, first there's music from the Prins Claus Conservatoire, Amy Zuidema and Pilar Sotes. Can I ask you to come forward, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Hi, I'm American, not Dutch. Well, not Dutch enough. Speak Dutch to you today. I will be playing a piece for you that I wrote, inspired by the residency that I spent here and my colleagues did here last year. It's called An Open Field, a Gray Sky. And there's a video that I took from the grounds of Camp Westerbork that I'll be showing. And I'm sorry, it's very emotional, like after this discussion, and it's so personal to share this kind of work. But it's also, again, what they were saying is just so important. But it is a reflection on dehumanization, as well as the interpersonal grief and feelings that come along with that. But, you know, I really, in this reflection, thought of like keeping love for oneself in the face of adversity and hate. And that's kind of what inspired this piece. So I'll just take a moment because I have to get a couple things, but I'm excited to share it for you today. Thank you. And this is a piece, kind of a poem or a fragment, I suppose, that I wrote. Trying to get my iPad and the computer to start at the same time, so just bear with me for one moment.
Hello, I'm Pilar, and I will be singing El Sonido del Tren, which means the sound of the wind. And this is basically a prayer to the wind from a person which is in the camp. It's asking for guidance, for help, for hope, and yeah, thank you. ¿Dónde están los sonidos que vuelven? El viento, ¿dónde me va a llevar? Pero siempre que me lleve, que me lleve. ¿Dónde está el sonido del viento? ¿Dónde está? Se lo ha llevado el sonido del tren. Allá se va. No sabemos dónde va, a dónde os los lleváis, porque nunca sabemos nada. Será porque el destino así lo quiere el destino, quiere llevarnos a nosotros. Yo le pido que me dé fuerza, que me dé donde poder estar, que me ayude a caminar y que me guíe, que sepa cómo avanzar, que me lleve, que me lleve, que me lleve, que me lleve a donde va. Viento mío, escúchame, ay, escúchame, necesito entender para poder seguir, pero nunca volver, nunca volver. Quiero que me lleves, quiero que me lleves, quiero que me lleves a otro lugar. En libertad. ¿Dónde está el sonido del viento? Se lo ha llevado el sonido del tren. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy and Pilar. This was very intense. I would say it really touched me as somebody working in a memorial center for almost 2 decades. So thank you again. We now go to the second round table. And this round table is about education and the way of telling the story of a place like Kamp-Westerbork. And we have 2 experts, of course, next to Michael. Our first expert is David Hoff, teacher at the Carolus Clusius College, one of the partner schools of the earlier mentioned Houses of Darkness project. And secondly, can I invite Tine Stolte from the Prins Claus Conservatoire, of course, one of the coordinators of the beautiful music and other music pieces we just heard. So thank you both. And we also asked David and Tine to introduce a little bit about themselves and the projects they worked on here in Westerbork in the last 1.5 years by saying something about these projects. So David, can you start? And I have some pictures from our trip to Falstad. Can you elaborate a little bit about that?
Great that you bring it up, Bas. Thank you very much. For the last 3 years, we've been cooperating here, but also with Falstad, with a group of my pupils. And they started 3 years ago when they were in year 4, and we visited Westerbork. We also visited Gemmeker's house. And I asked the pupils to do research about a perpetrator in Westerbork itself, and also a perpetrator or someone who could have been a perpetrator in like more or less nowadays. And I brought up one of the pieces of art one of the pupils created. It's this painting. She was 15, 16 by the time she made it, and she researched Hans Margules here in Westerbork, and also Natasha Kampusch, the girl who was abducted and held for 12, 15 years in a house in Austria. And what she tried to depict, and that's why I brought it, is that the person is, well, in the center of attention. Everything is focused on them, but they are themselves are trying to, well, to not be there. They're being in a fetal position, shielding their, covering their head, covering their ears, trying to not be there because they are somehow a perpetrator. Natasha Kampusch made a very livable home while being abducted, and Hans Margules was working on aiding the transportation. And she tried to depict that, and I think she did so wonderfully. And the great thing about the project is that it gave the pupils both the opportunity to develop an academic skill set and academic knowledge, but also to work on how to express that in art, how to bring that empathy in an art product.
It's very interesting that in a half hour we go inside the curatorship, of course, of Michael, and there you can see also the image of Hans Margules. So both a 16-year-old and a little bit older 46-year-old worked on the same image. So very interesting to see both perspectives. So maybe for the time being, for today, we can bring it a little bit into the exhibition. There's a painting hanging there. We could switch it with this painting and see how two people differently maybe look on the painting. Tine, also, you brought with you two projects, I would say, and of course, this is what we just saw. This is the making of that. Can you talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, maybe a little bit go into this. Well, we represent the conservatoire, of course, and traditionally, of course, in the conservatoire education, we prepare students very much for performance and for the stage. And that's often, of course, explained as the stage of a concert venue. But now we also feel that the stage can be expanded to so many different contexts, and we feel in the 21st century it's so relevant to see also the value and the power of art or the power of music be explained and exhibited in so many different areas. So we go into nursing homes, into hospitals, into prisons, of course as a conservatoire at the north of the Netherlands, we also want to connect to the places that are important in the north of the Netherlands, or institutions or sites or organizations. So that's why we also came here at the Kamp Westerbork, because it's such a unique and also iconic place in the north of the Netherlands. And we brought our international group of NIPE students. They are from the strand New Audiences and Innovative Practice. And they came to Westerbork last year, working at the camp for 4 days as artists in residence. And you see some pictures here. So the thing that we did together with Ernst Reisger and Guy Wood was first start filming, making some videos, and then starting to compose based on that. But of course, not from scratch. It was a process from scratch. But of course, we were guided over the camp, and we talked to Mr. Povel, who was a grandchild of his grandmother, was here. So he talked to us, and it made a big impression, of course, especially with a group of students from all over the world, to be in a place like this and to learn more about yourself, and also to express what you experience here, the sound of the place, and to feel the place and to experience how it is to be here. And that was basically depicted, as you call it, into the music. And later on, they sat on the material for several months and recorded in the studio. Yeah.
And a second project with some of the same faces, but maybe also other faces.
Yeah, well, just to paint the picture a little bit wider, I mean, we work then in the setting of Westerbork. That's why we are here, of course. But also this in the same year, and also currently, we are working at for instance, another example of how we work within the frame of contexts, because we feel it's important to bring our students into the real life context, so that they can respond to what is happening there. And we are currently working at the Boterdiep, which is a street in Groningen. So it's an urban setting and a social setting where some companies also dedicate their work on helping people with distance from the society, suffering from psychological problems or homelessness, to connect again and to be part of work and society again. So we work in this urban setting right now, and you can see the work happening at the Brouw, which is a brewery where they work with people with these problems and issues, and we connect to them there also.
And the same question I had for Jacob in the first round. 2 projects, 2 different kind of topics. Comparing the process of going into the Westerbork project and this project. Is it completely different, or is it a little bit the same? The Holocaust and another kind of topic that you, how do you approach that?
Well, I think the concept is comparable, because the concept basically is very much about people connecting to people, or people connecting to people in a context. But of course, and I think Amy also said it, it's very emotional. It has been very emotional to be here, and it was really very intense. We brought students from all over the world, but Amy said, like, I'm from the United States and Pilar's from Spain, but we had also some people from Iran. So it were Iranian students. So the situation in Iran last year was also pretty intense. So it is really ticking some boxes in terms of emotions and politics, and well, there's a conversation going on, and it's a different kind of a conversation, of course, here than at the Boterdiep. That should be clear.
So listening to you both, to, I would say, enriching younger people to successful projects, but just like in the first round, to be provocative. In the beginning of the year, there was a big survey amongst also young people in the Netherlands that stated that a lot of people don't know about the Holocaust anymore, and looking at the state of the world. David, do young people want to learn about the Holocaust, or is it like ancient history? It's boring. How do you look at it?
Well, I think it's one of our tasks to make it interesting and relevant, especially relevant to them. But you also see with everything that's happening in the world, every time something pops up, and different aspects of the Holocaust, but also different aspects of every history come up. Like 2 years ago, it was the history of Russia and Ukraine. And you can also deal with it from a totally different perspective. And now Ronit already mentioned it, but there's like what's going on in Israel right now makes the history of the Holocaust relevant in a totally new and also totally the same, but still also in a totally new way relevant again. So it keeps being relevant. And also to circle back to the previous discussion about Schindler's List. Of course, the pupils need people and kids as well. They need a knowledge base and also need some academic skills to deal with a subject. They also need some anchor points to get access to a subject. And a movie like Schindler's List can be very worthwhile for that because it's accessible. It's maybe a bit Disney-fied, but well, it's not for nothing because it makes it accessible. And watching Cloud Landsman's Shoah with 14-year-olds is well, a kind of torture on its own. Yeah, but it's undoable. But watching Schindler's List, kids can understand that. It relates to them emotionally, and based on that, there is some knowledge, there is some insight, and then you can build on that.
So Tina, we heard that young people want to learn if you do it in the right way. But what can we learn from the Holocaust? Can we learn anything? There's a big discussion, people saying the Holocaust is unique, you cannot learn anything from it. And what can you learn, and what kind of role can art play in that?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's a very big question, right? But relating to what we have been doing and what I take from that is also that I think it's very relevant that we as artists and as musicians, we relate to and connect and engage ourselves into the real world and real life. And this is part of our real world because, as also Michael said, it happened and yet it happens again, right? So to have the unique experience of being here and create art related to what you experience here, I think that the values, that's overarching time. I think that's very relevant now. And we can learn also, of course, from how students, younger people, what their perspective is and their experience connecting to this side and this history also. So yeah, I feel it's relevant. Yeah,
relevant, especially in countries where it happened. So you can go to Westerbork, but Michael, you're also a teacher in a country where it didn't happen, and you learned it by your teacher doing kind of a psychedelic role play and watching TV. How do you do that in England?
Well, I think the first thing is the island of Alderney and the Channel. So we, being British, we now have our own
camp.
Yeah,
which the local population doesn't want. That's the other.
True. Yeah. So that is getting talked about more. I think there are methodologies and approaches. So I guess the way to sort of package me, if you like, is a practice-based researcher. So it's rooted in academia, but it happens in physical. So when I come to Westerbork, I walked, photographed. It wasn't just all research in the traditional sense, and that. The result of that is coming up with sort of strategies and approaches and methodologies. So with, in particular, things like Black Lives Matter, a lot of my students became interested in slavery, colonial past, and how they carry that as a country that's benefited, maybe still is benefiting from having an empire and colonies. And I was able to help them just through this more, it's a more universal way of looking at it, but the idea of art as a way to deal with challenge and bring about conversations on trauma and traumatic pasts and histories and heritage. And I guess, I guess things you might inherit through where you're born, which I know is kind of, you don't decide that, but you grow up in it and you have advantages and disadvantages either way. So yeah, I think in terms of strategies, it's a way for students to deal with the things that they're interested, going off on their own interests in terms of the art students. And then in terms of education about the Holocaust, one thing that strikes me and that I always find really interesting is that when there's kind of polls or research done, young British children, teenagers do know about the Holocaust in a very clunky sort of way. But one of the things that I find most interesting is they believe that the Second World War was about Britain and America freeing the Jews. and that was the motivation, and that's the way it comes. And I think it's sometimes almost framed in that we had to come to this agreement with the Soviets because look what the Nazis were doing to the Jews. So I think there, the artworks and some of the projects I'm working on now, they're very fresh. I know we've briefly talked about making a lesson plan to go with an exhibition that a teacher can then use and use these works to bring about other discussions. This idea of being about questions and conversations, it challenges these quite strongly established narratives that are, you might say, developed for the shaping of a nation or a nation's perception of itself.
And jumping on that, David, imagine tomorrow you quit your job as a teacher and you become an educator at a memorial center. Can you copy your methods in the classroom one-on-one on the place itself?
No, I don't. I think the big difference is that in the classroom, I've been working with the pupils for 3 years, so I developed a connection with them, an emotional bond. And the great thing, last year we went to Falstad in Norway, which was a experience on its own. But then after the summer break, the lesson started again, and it was obvious, both from my point of view, but also from the pupils, that we were just like happy to see each other. And if you host different groups all the time, this whole emotional connection is not that strong and not that thorough.
And also from a different kind of perspective, ethically, maybe young people have different kind of opinions about the Holocaust and act differently on a campsite. People, maybe people related to the victims do. How do you deal with that in a classroom with those ethical, Tina, with those ethical differences? Are there ethical differences, or do you think that we as older people look at those ethical boundaries the same?
Yeah, I mean, I might not be the right person to ask this question to, because of course we work with adults. These are master students, so they already are professionals, and they behave like professionals as well. Talking about ethics, of course, that's also something. If you're in education and you bring students to a site like this, of course, ethics are discussed in terms of questions, in terms of how to deal with this. Of course, it's a privilege to work in a community with adult students, because you can enter the space in an open way in terms of creating the ethics or discuss the ethics together, and it's an evolving discussion while you are here. And I think that's very valuable and meaningful to be able to be as a group of learners, and also the teachers involved are part of the community of learners. That it's a non-hierarchical situation, basically, where we all find our way of how to deal with this situation, being a international group of people at a place like this, and what does that mean. So I think that's also part of the learning for us as an institution, that we also learn to be learners, and how to do that together with our students. That comes out of this also.
And is then making art together a good way? Of course, you are professionals, but do you think this is also a good way for every level, to do something instead of just listening to what is being told in the museum?
Of course, I would say yes. Because an easy assignment like, okay, walk over the camp, use your phone and say, what do you feel? Well, can you collect the sound of this place? Is already a doable thing for everybody, artists or not. Yeah.
And David, ethically, of course, you have the advantage that you see children coming on high school when they're 12 years old, and the students we work with now are in the 6th grade. Is there a difference between those ages? Like Tina said, she works with master students, and ethically, how do you deal with it if jokes come up?
Yeah, of course there's a difference, but there's also a difference in the way the group is composed. Well, the 3 years ago, we visited with a group of 11 pupils, and that makes it easier to bring across the gravitas of the location. And we visited Gammaker's house, and it was very intense, but also because the group was very small. I remember like 12 years, 15 years ago, with the third grade, so there was 15-year-old pupils. We visited Westerbork as well. There was a group of 60 pupils. Then it's way more crowd control. Then and like making sure that they are not making jokes that are inappropriate. The thing that struck me, because I was thinking about what you were saying, when we were in Falstad, we were housed in the former concentration camp. One of the pupils was emotionally very upset about that, but then over the course of the week, it changed. And one of the things that stood out to me, because I remember at the time, I was already feeling like, is it ethical? Because they started playing hide and seek in the former concentration camp itself. But then, like the way the atmosphere was with the whole group, it didn't feel unethical at all. Later on, I thought they kind of humanized the place. They filled it again with children's laughter, and they filled it again with life. And so it really is also based on the context on what takes place.
And I think one of the things that we did in Falstad, we brought along, and he couldn't make it today. He was already also invited, Pirmin Renges, and he had a workshop also with art. And the question he asked to the students was, think about your own perpetratorship. And can you talk a little bit about what happened then? I think that was very interesting.
Yeah, definitely. It was the fascinating thing about it was that it helped them to convey their emotions, and well, bring across what they felt, what they went through, and also well, how to bring across the ethics that they ran into themselves. What values did they cross themselves towards themselves? So how did their self-image conflict with something they did actively themselves?
So we have here 3 teachers, you could say, who work with students from different kind of ages. And a lot of time you are seen as, you have to tell the story of the Holocaust, or tell the story, you are giving a monologue almost. But what do you learn from students in these kind of projects yourself? And what do you take along, Michael?
I think the main thing, and I'm not getting out of the question, is just never underestimate your audience. The students always surprise me with not necessarily the historical knowledge, but the way they can grasp concepts. And we were talking in the previous roundtable about the sort of contemporary relevance and how quickly that connection can be made. But obviously from my teaching is fine art and contemporary art, and it's a very broad subject. So yeah, in terms of my teaching, I have maybe 2 or 3 students who are really interested, but they kind of apply it to their own histories. What one has an Armenian background and has seen my work and is now able to kind of start making work about language and diaspora that student feels about being of Armenian descent. But yeah, I think for me in teaching, it's methodology, and it's also getting the students to think about what art can do. And obviously, this is a very particular site, but there are many other areas in society where art can have, an equal impact, where I guess everybody here is invested in the subject in some way, the context and the history of Westerbork. So yeah, for me and my teaching, it's about, you can tackle all kinds of different subjects. It isn't just thinking about traditional arts and what they offer.
And for you, David, were you surprised in those 2.5 years? And maybe in general, are you surprised on a daily basis by your students?
Yeah, definitely. And there are too many things I was surprised about in the past 2.5 years. too many great memories, I think. But one of the things that stand out with teaching, but especially with a subject as serious and as sad as the Shoah, is the fact that as soon as they know like the broad story, it's the details that make it come to life. I know Guido brought a jacket of a concentration camp survivor here when we were here, and that really touched a couple of the pupils. And basically, well, we talked about Schindler's List. It's basically like the red jacket in the movie. That's the thing that makes you feel the sadness, and it's those details that stick out.
And for you, Tina, because of course you saw the pictures, you were here and you saw every student creating and really get the mind going, and maybe you had thoughts on forehand, okay, maybe this is gonna come out of it. How did that, were you surprised by what came out? And again, the first question, as a teacher, do you learn also from your students?
Yeah, definitely. I think the most powerful thing that came out for me was that I mean, I'm from the north of the Netherlands, so I've been at Westerbork so many times also as a child. I know about the history of the war because my parents were children during the war and my grandparents lived through it as adults. So I know these stories, but now I came at this familiar place for me with these students. For them it was new. And at the end of the week, I was able to look at the camp through their eyes, basically. And I think also their art is highlighting and focusing on particular emotions, because I think music is really a great tool for freezing one particular emotion and highlight it and intensify it. And through their music, there were totally new perspectives for me to this familiar place, looking at the same place but through their eyes, basically.
So final question for all three of you, and it's the same question as the last question in the first round table. So David, in 25 years time, you walk inside the Memorial Center. How does it look like? Is there even a Memorial Center? How can we reach, as a Memorial Center, the young public that is now in your classroom?
Well, the thing about predictions, they're really hard, especially when they have to do with the future. So, yeah, it's impossible to tell. But I think we definitely should keep telling the story. Well, given that I assume that nothing will change in that spectacular way, I think we will more go towards an approach in which you experience what happened. So it will basically be a bit disnified, but that will help bring across the story. Also when there are no survivors left anymore, and it's further away for us, so it's also emotionally easier to turn it into something more, well, I hate to say it, but more playful.
More playful, more distant, but on the other hand, the key should be make it personal.
Yeah, not fun, but playful in the sense that you get to experience things more, and maybe recreate things in a way that you can see how it used to be.
And in 25 years time, Tina, there will be a dozen of art educators here.
Definitely. Or not? Well, art could do its work, I think. Yeah, if I'm thinking about this place, but specifically about the campsite, I hope in 25 years, the campsite will be very much the place to go still, so that people really can stroll over this field, in that particular space, because I also feel there's something to it. There's something there to experience, to hear, to see, to observe, and to also incorporate. I think that also well, Pilar and Amy showed what came out of that kind of experience. And I hope people 25 years from now can still have that kind of an experience at the campsite.
Take in the soul of the site
Yeah.
itself, and it doesn't always matter if there's a lot of things to see, to take in. And I think you were totally right. The beautiful music pieces we heard, that was definitely the soul of the story in it. Of course, Michael, you already answered this question in the first round. So another question for you to make it difficult. We have now had 2 roundtables. You had a process of 2 years of working on the exhibition. We're gonna see. What do you, as a person, take out of today, yesterday, into the future? Did it change you a little bit as a person? What did you get out of it?
Absolutely, yeah, it did. I think the main thing it changed was that I never expected to be considering the camps as kind of operational, functional places. I always expected, particularly from previous projects, it was how do I translate this? How do I turn it into something else? So there's, yeah, I think moving forward, it's kind of looking at the mechanisms of engagement, the audience interaction, and how that sort of works. But to kind of answer the previous question, I also think we might have reached peak virtual reality, and that the more physical, tactile, personal will come back. That might have been in and out of fashion in 25 years' time, but I think that the objects and stories and the very personal kind of narratives is probably that's a prediction.
I'm gonna hold you to that. So wise words, and I think for 1.5 hours we try to explain what art is, and I always learned you have to look at art. So I would say now take a look at the art, beautiful art that Michael created. So thank you everybody watching on the stream. Thank you everybody here in the room, and let's go and drink a little bit and see the exhibition. One word.
Yep, sorry, I just want to thank Bas for his help and inviting me. I don't think Guido's here, but Guido was really pivotal in revealing the archive and sort of pulling objects out and alerting me to things that I really just wouldn't have seen otherwise. Mike and Jack, I think Jack might be behind there, yeah, for their help installing. It went so smooth, that was great. Joost for his work with PR, thank you. And everybody else who I've seen along the way. Yeah, I just want to say thank you in general to Westerbork, because it's been really great. I've been very well looked after, and I feel really privileged to have actually been given the chance to do this here. So thank you.
Even more wise words, guys. Let's. Now, I would say if you lead us the way, Michael, then we can go to the exhibition and see the beautiful things you made. So thank you, guys.